We kick off with ranger training on Minbar, where one of the warrior caste recruits is complaining about needing to meditate while the instructor keeps talking and distracting him. Another ranger comes in, and then these two banter with all the chemistry of a xenon-helium mixture.
Yes. I am a nerd.
So these two, along with a pair of these Nimrods, will be going to Delenn on B5 to report on how things are going in person. The one that's struggling to meditate and the one who smirks during meditation are both brought for this job. Screw up and get cool assignments. One more thing to add to the ability to kick ass with a metal stick as a job perk. Meanwhile,
leave the body where they'll find it. I want everyone to know there's a new power in town. Because from now on, Babylon 5 belongs to me.
I love B5, but this is really off to a bad start. The first scene as an actor performs like there's no one else in the room with him, and this feels like a direct-to-video scene. I can't even say what it is about the scene that's bugging me specifically. There's just a general stench to it. Well, let's jump to after the titles. The four rangers arrive on the station and are greeted by Delenn to bring their subplot, while Garibaldi and Zack hang out over lunch. Captain Lochley arrives looking for a chair, and Garibaldi invites her to join them. This seemed nice, but then you find out all he wants to do is fuck with her, bringing up being on the other side during the Civil War.
Who said I was on the other side?
As I discussed in the first episode of this season, Lochley's position is a brave choice with lots of potential that sadly goes unexplored, and so consequently, this scene feels unearned. Lochley's argument is that she wasn't on Clark's side either. She followed orders because none of the ones she got were illegal or immoral, so until one did, her duty was to Earth. Now, I could probably have at least accepted this, but what pushed it beyond my ability to was everybody in the room applauding her. I confess to an instinctual inclination to interrogate any work that praises the wisdom of its own position. See the Prime Directive speeches in Star Trek. I can perfectly agree that there is an argument that if you're not with us, you're against us is too binary in almost any situation. That there are plenty of instances where one cannot choose a side, because one either can't, period, or doesn't see a reason to. And there are also reasons why, even if one sympathizes with a side, action might be impossible or unacceptable. We're talking about a regime that on the one hand was presented as nakedly evil, yes. But on the other, it also had domination of information. That means that there were likely plenty of people who maybe at most had suspicions something might be up, but not enough to take action. And yes, I know, Babylon 5 had the voice of the resistance. But we have a special view on those events. We know that Ivanova is committed solely to sharing the truth. But that's something that we gain as outside viewers who get to look at anything that it's felt we should know. We're given a view that nobody else really gets of what's happening there. And so the question is, are you expecting people who have no reason to just assume that Ivanova is telling the truth as opposed to, say, whatever Sheridan's own propaganda is? Because you have no way to know after all. You only know that one side is saying something that is completely incompatible with the interpretations of events by the other side. And you don't know which it is. And both are extremely different from each other. I mean, imagine if after the attempt on Donald Trump's life, you tried to understand what it was that happened, except instead of the numerous sources of news you had for that, there were actually only two. One has the headline, "Trump murder plot fails due to president senility." And the other headline says, "Valiant time traveler thwarted in effort to save the future." It's not unreasonable that for people looking at that to wonder what the hell the truth even is in such a situation. How can I figure out what's actually going on around here to figure out where I stand on things? And it's no wonder that someone might say, you know what? I'm just going to base my decisions on what I personally experience and can judge to be actually happening. I would have been totally fine with it if Lochley had said something like, "Hey, guess what? We're not clairvoyant. We had two opposing versions of truth and nothing to use to decide whose was real, if either even was. And I was not the totality of my ship. Each member of my crew was trying to make the same judgment and reach their own conclusions, positions they were passionate about, to the point of arguments and the occasional fist fight. So no, I didn't run off to join your revolution the moment you blew your trumpet, because I knew the moment I tried to mutiny, I'd have a mutiny of my own, and I wasn't going to have my crew start killing each other on a whim. I waited to see if we were ever given an illegal or immoral order, and we never were. So yes, good for you. You were on the right side of history, and all I could say in my own defense is I chose not to force the crew I was responsible for to take up arms against each other. It may not have been a glamorous duty, but it was mine, and I stuck with it." So yeah, it's not as if there's not room for Lochley to have a position which could be argued to have nuance to it. But no, we don't get some believable argument along those lines. We get the rah-rah of duty, honor, and loyalty. Which, first off, this show has not been about, just follow your orders no matter where they lead. But then that sickening applause afterwards. Oh, God. Yeah, you know what I really want to see? Someone saying, "I was only following the orders of fascists," and giving it a round of applause. Well, back to the murder. The corpse is a recent arrival, ran up his credit at the casino, and, well, now he's dead. Zach figures somebody saw something. If there was any way we could persuade some upstanding citizen to speak up.
Look, this is the third murder in 2 weeks. All execution style, all with a single PPG hit. Now my guess is there's going to be more, until the guy who's doing this makes his point.
So I'm looking for anyone volunteering to be next on his list by talking to me. The bad guy, Trace, is convinced Zach is a threat and wants him dealt with. One of his minions explains that the higher-ups on this station don't back down. Taking out Zach will just bring down a world of hurt on them. Trace says that at the last place, before they were kicked out because of the war, they were in the same situation. If you just murder long enough, it finally solves your problem. Someone else with problems are the Rangers, who say they've been taking in members of the Alliance races as was requested, except the Pak'ma'ra is a problem.
We have no idea what to do with the Pak'ma'ra. They're slow, greedy, selfish, not very bright. They refuse to speak anything other than their own language, so we have to use a translator, and they're carrion eaters.
But he's got heart. Delenn makes the point that if a member race isn't suited to the traditional ranger roles, perhaps a new role exists. In their case, couriers. The Pak'ma'ra are everywhere. They're traders, and their less than appealing dining habits means that people don't really want to hang around with them. Because everybody is accustomed to seeing them in places but not wanting to really look into why they're there, they could be used to carry secure communications and valuable items without drawing attention. Plus, nobody wants to cavity search them, that's for sure. After the meeting, the two noobs are dismissed to explore the station so that the one instructor can discuss Lanier with Delenn. Seems that he's training a little too hard, to the point of being worrying. We'll have to backburner that, though. Right now, we got to check in with Garibaldi, who, along with Zach, is briefing the telepath leads on how their teams will work. Once that excitement's done, Garibaldi asks Zach to pull Lochley's file. He wants to know what they're dealing with her. Zach, naturally, says no, and Garibaldi protests that it's just to understand the larger situation, but that doesn't seem to budge him into wanting to violate privacy and probably regulations too, purely to satisfy Garibaldi's curiosity. Well, the only thing that moves him from that spot, in fact, is a tip from someone about the murders. Someone who has a clean record but wants to talk only to Zach to avoid reprisals. Well, it turns out she's working for Trace, luring Zach into a trap in exchange for a ticket home. But then they discuss the murder right in front of her, and it's really not the way to do that. Either yakking about it where anybody can hear, or going in without having already made decisions about where you're going to leave the body in advance. Organized murder shouldn't be like jazz where you're just freewheeling it. Well, Thing 1 and Thing 2 hear her screams after she protests about this, and there's disagreement on whether or not to get involved. But the religious caste ranger rushes in, thwarts the killing of that girl, but gets hit from behind, and then an ass-whooping. The other rangers don't take that well.
It refers to a part of ranger training. It means the application of terror.
There's a 20th century word choice for you. Delenn goes to tell Lochley that this is now an internal ranger matter and to stay out of it. The Alliance Treaty stipulates the ranger's authority supersedes local authority. Lochley lets slip that Sheridan supporting such an act isn't like him, a note called out for hinting about their mutual past. There's a conversation between the instructor and the other ranger about his behavior during that attack, where he's cajoled into admitting he didn't go along because he feared this was something trivial, and he would be risking his life for something meaningless. This is the moment when, finally, the episode gives us one of JMS's examples of wisdom that actually lives up to what the show has done. He asks if climbing a mountain to retrieve a single flower, and upon returning, knowing his journey would end in death, would be meaningless. When told yes, he then adds that knowing that this flower would inspire 1,000,000 people who are waiting, and be the impetus to drive them to take action and liberate the oppressed on a grand scale, would that change his answer? The point is that the value of an act does not exist in a vacuum, but upon its place within the larger tapestry, and if one feels the act was a righteous one, then any death is honorable. Except the way Elvis went out, of course. Well, that terror thing isn't the spreading of terror, it's about confronting what terrified him. They isolate the deck where Trace and his crew are, cut the power, and proceed to take out all of the mooks, leaving Trace alone. This story is a beat-up-the-bully fantasy, so this is about knocking the pegs out from under Trace. Trace's only way out, he's told, is to get past his victim. If he can, they'll let him go. This is handled in, I guess appropriately, a ham-fisted way. Our ranger wins, says he pities the dipshit for being a dipshit, and that's that. Oh, and in the coda, Delenn brings up the thing Lochley said, and now there's tension. The end. Thankfully. Learning curve is slightly important, in that it slightly gets into Lochley. It is unfortunate that there is not the room in the season for this to be a slow burn towards something that truly means something. I reiterate my wish that they would have recast and brought back the original second-in-command, Takashima, for the role. That would make the dynamic between her and Garibaldi take on an entirely new dimension, and have potential for interactions with Lita as well. Plus, if there was some Psychor-related thing that explained her removal from Babylon 5, that would allow for the telepath arc to have interesting potential with her, too. If Season 5 does anything, it should make you appreciate how much care went into crafting the series, as these things hint that the season was rushed in order to begin production on time, with the seams showing. I give Learning Curve a stamp of watchable, but this is giving me some of those Season 1 vibes where the mostly isolated episodes struggled. It seems like the script is an unpolished draft, the directing is dubious, and the casting is off. Even JMS admits he dropped the ball on this one.